Today I'm back on this 1997 F150. Got the big 5.4 in it, and this thing is a return to the shop, not because of an accident or something that we did wrong, but because we sent it away to test something out on purpose, and now has come back with some more information for us to help us in a diagnosis. So what this thing had going on, it presented last time with a real bad misfire. It was stumbling, put, but it wasn't consistent. It was kind of intermittent. It would miss under certain conditions, under loads, sometimes just at idle, but sometimes it would run just fine. So it was kind of a head scratcher. And this, being a 97, is a little old for some of the more advanced diagnostics that we can do with the computer these days. So what we did is we found that the cylinder number 8, which this is a V8, and the way that they're numbered on this guy, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So cylinder 8 is the furthest one back on the driver's side. We noticed that that one was misfiring. How do we figure that out? Well, there are some clues in the computer. Hooking up with the code scanner, you can start to see a little bit of misfire information, and sometimes it'll give you which cylinder it is. But a lot of cases, these older vehicles, they may not be able to do that. So what I like to use on these older ones is just an old school method that you learn from, the guys of yesteryear, and that is, if one of your cylinders is missing, if you pull either the spark plug or the fuel away from one cylinder at a time, which one do you do that to, and nothing changes about the way the car's running? Sometimes you need to figure out which cylinder is the problem cylinder, and on these older vehicles, you can't always get that information out of the computer. A trick I learned from an old timer once is something that I'll share with you here. If you got one cylinder that's missing, car's running it's missing on one cylinder. A little trick that I learned from an old timer is that you can go while it's running and pull either the ignition coil wire or the fuel injector off of one cylinder at a time. And what'll happen is, if it's the wrong cylinder, if it's a different cylinder than the one giving you trouble, it'll start to run worse. So let's say it's going put. You pull a spark plug wire or an ignition coil wire or a fuel injector wire off of a cylinder, and it starts running worse. Now it's missing on two, not just one cylinder, but two. And so you know that you have not found your culprit cylinder to begin with. And so you put those back on, it starts running the way it was a moment ago. You go to the next cylinder and pull the ignition feed wire or the fuel injector wire off of that cylinder. And all of a sudden you notice, I removed fuel or I removed spark from that cylinder, but it sounds exactly the same as it did before I did that. Well, there's your problem cylinder. That's the clue that you need to say, aha, this is my problem cylinder. Now you can plug that back in, try it again. Sure enough, no change in the way that the engine runs, no change in the way it sounds. There's your problem. You're ready to move on to diagnosing why. Now that you know which cylinder it is, you can start to dive in a little deeper. First thing to do, just a visual inspection. Okay, look and see. Is there something wrong with the wires? Is there something wrong? Is it leaking fuel around the fuel injector? Is there a lot of oil or water in the area of that cylinder? Those are clues on the outside before you even dig in that'll lead you to the problem. After you've looked visually on the outside and you didn't find anything, now it's time to go a little deeper. Now we're going to pull a spark plug on that cylinder that you suspected was a problem. Some of the problems that you might find when you pull that spark plug are the spark plug could be broken. Maybe the coil that was attached or the wire that was attached to that spark plug came off a funny way. A piece of it was left behind. Maybe it wasn't making good connection. Maybe you see on that spark plug on the outside on the porcelain, there's a lot of black scarring. Looks like, it burned, like lightning bolts have burned along the side of it. Might be an indicator that it's jumping spark outside and not shooting it through that spark plug. The spark plug itself, you can read the inside of the engine where that spark plug goes in. You can read that part of the spark plug, and it'll tell you a lot about the health of that cylinder. If that's wet with gasoline, well, it's not burning all the gasoline. If that's wet with oil, well, that maybe there's a problem with oil getting into that cylinder and fouling out your plug. These are just some of the issues that come up sometimes when you look at the plugs in more detail. So on this one, yeah, it came back into the shop, but that's on purpose. So last time it showed up with that misfire, we diagnosed it down to cylinder number 8, which is the one furthest back on the driver's side or the left side of the engine. You always label left and right based on the sitting in the driver's seat. Is it the left, which is the driver's side, or is it the right, which is the passenger side? So when you're sitting in the driver's seat, you're looking at the engine. We're talking about the left side, the bank furthest back, the cylinder furthest back. And so that cylinder was the one that had the misfire. When we pulled the plug on that cylinder, we found oil on the spark plug inside that cylinder. So it made us kind of scratch our heads a little bit. Oh, we got some oil fouling going on here. All we know is that oil's getting in there. We don't know how yet. And we don't also know if that was the problem causing the misfire or just another sort of side issue. So what we did is we swapped the coil and plug from a good running cylinder, which happened to be a couple in front of it, number 6. So we took number 6's coil and plug and we put it back on number 8. We took the bad ones from number 8, cleaned them up a little bit, put them on number 6. Okay, took the oil off of that plug before we put it in. After we swapped the coil and plug from number 8 to number 6 and vice versa, we said, okay, let's go see what that did. Started it up. Hey, the misfire is gone. That's good. We fixed it. Well, no, not necessarily. You have temporarily fixed it, but you don't know what the root cause was. And if you don't want comebacks, you don't want returns, figure out the root cause. You don't want these customers coming back and saying, hey, you told me that you fixed it and it's running bad again, and you find out it's the same thing. Because when it's the same thing, it's on you. You pay for it. You're not charging them again. After swapping the coil and plug from 8 into 6, drove off, running just fine. So now we wait. Does the problem come back? And if so, how quickly? Those are clues to tell you what the root cause is. And so I drove it around for, 10, 15 minutes, no problems. Let it sit overnight, drove it around the next day for 10, 15 minutes, no problem. Okay, customer, come back, get your truck, drive it around, and let me know if it starts acting up again. He's a friend of mine, so he said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So he drives off, doesn't even make it into town, 30 minutes away, and it starts acting up again. Man, he calls me up. I'm so sorry, sir. I told you, I expect this to happen. I was kind of hoping it would take a little while longer, because really I was hoping that the root cause, in a way, I was hoping this, not necessarily for the customer, but I was hoping that root cause was the oil fouling on number 8, and that it would take a while for oil to go down on that clean plug that we put in there from cylinder number 6 and coat it to the point where it started fouling. But the fact that it started missing again on him really quickly, that tells us something. It tells us that either there's a really bad oil leak into cylinder 8, that it fouled the clean plug in there almost instantaneously, or our problem lies in some other component, perhaps the components we moved to cylinder 6. So we get the truck back in here, it's missing again. This time the check engine light is on. Hey, that's good news. You got a check engine light, maybe there's something in the computer to tell you where to go look. at least where to start. Hook up the computer, read the codes. It says misfire on cylinder number 6 now. Remember, the original problem was on cylinder number 8, and we took its coil and plug and we moved them to cylinder number 6. Now the misfire moved to cylinder number 6. That's good. Knowing that that problem moved with those components from cylinder number 8 to cylinder number 6 is a good thing, because now we know that it's either one of those components. It's either the coil or the spark plug that's our problem. What it also tells us is that the oil fouling into cylinder number 8 may not be as big of a problem as we feared. So now that we've got the truck back in here, we know that there's an issue with cylinder number 6 now. And I'm curious just to see how dirty the plug got in the last few days on cylinder number 8. Let's see how much oil fouling is happening over those few days. That'll give us a clue of the health of that cylinder. But I'm going to take you here and we're going to dig into this engine, and we're going to pull the spark plugs on cylinder number 6 and number 8 and see what we see. Okay, so we're looking at the driver's side, or the left side of this engine, and we're going to be working on a couple of different cylinders. Cylinder number 8, which is all the way back here. I'm pointing to its ignition coil, and we swapped that one with cylinder number 6, which is right here, because it was easier to get to. Always try to work smarter if you can, guys. So I'm going to take you along as we try to get to and remove the coil and spark plug from number 8 back here and number 6, which is now where our misfire has moved to. And we're going to investigate those cylinders and see what's going on. There's a few of these hoses and pipes that need to come out of the way to get our hands back in there and get our tools in there, but we'll make that happen. So here we are. We're down on number 6, and I'm removing the bolt that holds the ignition coil in. Kind of a tight fit. I hope that you can see what I'm doing here. So now that I've got the bolt that retains that ignition coil taken out of the way, we can slide the ignition coil up and out off of the spark plug. So you just grab hold of it and pull up. You don't have to undo the wire yet. You can do that when it's up a little bit more out of the way like I am. It's easier to grab hold of it and squeeze the connector. There we go. All right, there's the ignition coil that we took out of cylinder 8 and put into cylinder 6. Now we're on cylinder number 8, removing that ignition coil. It's even further back, and so of course it's going to be more difficult to get to, and obviously more difficult for you to see what I'm doing. All right, so now we're ready to remove the spark plugs. So I've got my spark plug tool here, and basically it's a spark plug socket that's captured to an extension, and it has a lot of flexibility to it. And inside the socket is a magnet, so it'll hold on to that spark plug and let you draw it out of these deep wells like this one has. Basically, you just feed it down inside of that well. Look how far down that spark plug is. I mean, it's way down in there, so it's good to have one of these extensions with a magnet. Go ahead and use our M12 Milwaukee electric ratchet here. Pull it on out. Just like that. So this is number 6 coming out. Let's take a look. So this is the one that was giving us the misfire this time. Well, the spark plug looks okay. Still good coloration. Doesn't look too burned up. So I'll bet you it's that coil that's giving us the problem on number 6. Let's go ahead and pull number 8, because I'm curious to see how much oil has gotten on that plug just in the last few days. It's kind of back here, but we'll go fishing. All right, we got down inside the well. I can feel that that socket is on there. Get the ratchet, attach it to that extension. All right, just like that. Okay, here's number 8. Hey, that's good news. Look at that. No oil on this plug. That's really good news. You know what that means is that whatever oil leak was in that cylinder to cause that oil fouling before is very minor. It hasn't happened in the amount of time that this has been together. Since these plugs look good, we're going to go ahead and put them back in. I think our problem lies with this ignition coil that was on number 8. It's probably getting burned out. See, when an ignition coil works as hard as this one had to work to shoot that spark through all that oil, it'll overheat itself over time. This one also happens to be tucked up underneath there in the back where it gets a lot of engine and exhaust heat on it, and heat will kill these things over time. So we're going to go ahead and replace this one with a new one. We're not going to replace all of them because that's very expensive. Just one of these is like $40 down at the local auto parts store. So here's our new ignition coil. You want to make sure that it looks just like the old one that you've taken out in every way, connector especially, and this one does. So we'll go ahead and take this coil and put it back on number 8 because that's the one that has the potential problems with heat and maybe some fouling over time. So that worked really well. We went through the old school method of figuring out which cylinder had a problem on it. We swapped some components from that cylinder to another one which didn't have a problem, and sure enough, the problem followed those components. So that told us really quickly what to look for. It was one of those components that we moved. In this case, it happened to be a bad coil. Got hot, was trying to fire through some oil in that cylinder. Remember, we got to that root cause. And we found out also that that cylinder, even though it had a little bit of oil fouling, it wasn't that bad. And the truck's been running well for a number of months now. Everything is going well, and I hope that you guys learned something tonight. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the video. It really helps the channel to reach a greater audience. Check out our next video here for more tips and tricks to save you time and save you money. Y'all have a wonderful day, and God bless.